Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm very excited to have Neelesh Marik here to talk about Savitri. It is one of the deepest works of spirituality, philosophy that I've come across. And Neelesh has been marinating in it, has been working on it for some time. So I'm really honored to have Neelesh talk about this great work. Welcome, Neelesh.
Thank you.
Folks, so the format today is I'm going to talk to Neelesh. We're going to just talk about the work. Everybody is going to be on mute. It'll be just going, Neelesh talking about the work. I'll be asking him questions. And once that is done, keep track of all the questions that you have. We'll collect all your questions, we'll organize them, and then we'll go through all of them. All right, that's the plan. So let's get started. We're looking at about an hour or so of the talk between me and Neelesh, and then we will go ahead and open it up for questions. Okay, we'll play it by the ear. I want to give it whatever time it needs. All right, Neelesh. So where shall we begin?
You had done a preparatory session. So we can probably proceed without getting too much into the original story. I think we could start with the author's note.
Very good. So let me remind those who are watching this on YouTube, if you're not familiar with the story of Savitri, there is a video that I have linked to where I did a full preparatory note. I usually don't do this for meetups, but I did a pre-meetup for this meetup to get everybody ready to listen to this meetup. So please go ahead and watch that before continuing with this video. Go ahead, Neelesh.
So if you, I can put the author's note on the screen so that you have it for reference, and then we can probably talk through the significance of the author's note to set the stage before we dive into the main work.
Perfect.
So then if you just take a minute to just go through the, it's a short author's note. You can see it on the screen. Just pause for a minute for you to go through, and then we will start.
Neelesh, shall we go ahead and read it out as well so people can hear it?
Okay, I'll do that. So here's the author's note. The tale of Satyavan and Savitri is recited in the Mahabharata as a story of conjugal love conquering death. You can hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
But this legend is, as shown by many features of the human tale, one of the many symbolic myths of the Vedic cycle. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who comes down and is born to save. Ashwapathy, the lord of the horse, her human father, is the lord of tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. Dyumatsena, lord of the shining hosts, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision, and through that loss, its kingdom of glory. Still, this is not a mere allegory. The characters are not personified qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch And they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life. Shrikant?
Yes. The first time I read this, I was just completely blown away, because this is core philosophy. This is the kind of the most concentrated version of philosophy that I've come across. Firstly, because it hits all of human experience, all the concepts to deal with human experience. And secondly, it dramatizes it with characters. So it is high art and high philosophy all in one, in a single paragraph.
So let's just talk about the author's note for a few minutes and then proceed to the discussion.
Sure.
Now, this note actually was not written as an author's note. It's the publishers of the book have called it the author's note, but the note was written in response to a letter of a disciple in the 1930s. And Sri Aurobindo just basically some question was asked and this was the response. And later on, it kind of was, as Shrikant said, chosen as the author's note by the publisher because it just fitted that way. But he didn't write it as an author's note. So that's the historical background. Now, the Vedas, he refers to the Vedic point. The Vedas, we have to understand, used symbolism to convey higher and hidden truths. And in that age, which was called the symbolic age, symbolism was the portal through which human beings could access higher realities without getting bound by the trenchancy of the written word. This is a very important point. So that is the backdrop of this whole composition. Not just the actual story of Savitri and the historical precedent of Savitri, but also this particular text and the way it is supposed to be read as a symbolic tale. This is very important. Now, what he says, what does he say here in the author's note? The first thing he says is that the ultimate power in the universe is love. This is probably not unknown to us, even though we may not know the full significance of what that love means. But he makes a categorical statement that the ultimate power is love. And if this love is recovered in its full power and glory, it can defeat the most inexorable law of nature, which is death. This is the first message. Man carries the divine spark within himself, but is usually a slave of nature, as if a misadventure of consciousness due to his entry, or rather birth, into material reality. So we are all like that. That's us. From this misadventure, the Divine Mother comes down to rescue man through the vibrational power of the sun-vast truth word. Sun-vast truth word. That's why Savitri she's referred to as the word. The word conveys the vibrational power which actually is considered to be the source of creation. In Vedic physics, it is literally the case. Now, so the vibrational power of the sun-vast Sunvast because Savitri is the daughter of Savitri, who is the sun god who was invoked by Savitri's mortal father to bring her down to earth, right? So that aspect is Savitri saving Satyavan. But she herself, as in Savitri herself, has to be invoked through the ascesis of the Lord of the Yoga to establish a strong foundation to receive her. So the Lord of the horse, which Ashwapathy is referred to, horse symbolizes the energism of the life force. You know, there's a term called horsepower in physics, which conveys energy, right? Usually, this horsepower, this life energy is very difficult to control, which is why we are normally out of sync with energy. Energy controls us rather than we controlling energy. So the Lord of the Tapasya and the Lord of the horse is one who has mastered the energies of nature. That is Ashwapathy. And tapas is the heat of the sacrificial fire of the tapasya, where the lower nature in us or in Ashwapathy has been sacrificed to the higher. It is very intense and very difficult tapasya, especially if we have to climb to the complete heights of the planes of consciousness. Only one who, so what is being shown here is that only one who has mastered the life energies can father the divine grace in human form.
Wow.
This is the implication.
Wow.
So that is, so in the story, when we say Ashwapathy brings Savitri down and receives her as a boon from the sun god, which those who know the story will understand what I'm saying. This is the significance, that to even ask the divine mother or the divine feminine to descend to earth to save man, a huge yagna is necessary. And that is performed by Ashwapathy. Ashwapathy. Ashwa is horse. Pati is Lord. Okay. Now, the stumbling of the mental consciousness of humanity is represented by the loss of light. Of usually Indra has been considered as the deity of mental illumination. That is why the term shining hosts. This loss is what Savitri's sadhana restores for Dyumatsena in the story. But the symbolic meaning is that man's loss from his mental consciousness is revived and he is taken beyond the mind by the sadhana or the yoga of the divine mother in him or in us, should we consent to participate in the yoga. So it's not just the sight, it's the sight in a literal and a metaphorical sense. And when he regains his sight, he regains his bearings, his orientation, himself, which is symbolized as the regaining of his kingdom or his destiny.
Mm-hmm.
The last part of the author's note indicates that behind the scenes, phenomenal existence as we know it is actually a vast interplay of various cosmic forces on which our mortal bodies, or of which our mortal bodies are materializations. And what we call ourselves by names, what we see as world events, are actually just the superficial renditions of a tumultuous interplay of cosmic forces. This is a very, very important point. And this is what he mentioned in the last part. Occultism in Europe, as is known, basically is the whole discipline that deals with the existence of these secret, mysterious, and supernatural agencies with which human beings can communicate and interact to harness and manipulate the hidden powers of nature. This is also called Tantra in the East. But as popularly understood, there are various falsehoods that have crept into these terms, and they have lost their path. But Sri Aurobindo is referring to occultism and Tantra in its highest sense. So at the conclusion of this note, what we have to, if we have to take away one point, we have to, because this is the context of the integral yoga, which we covered in our previous session. So when we say cosmic forces, yoga, unlike the normal yogas of, body postures and breathing, and they are very, very superficial. In the real secret spiritual sense, yoga can be understood as a round-the-clock 24-hour workout in the psychological gymnasium with these world forces and powers. But unlike occultism in Europe and several misguided parts of Tantra, this exercise, this workout in the gymnasium is not done for the self with the small s, but to serve the self with the capital S. That is a quick overview of the author's note.
Wow. This is profound. So, all right, let's dive into the work itself. This is a fantastic overview. I think your explanation of the relationships between these, that somebody has to actually do the work, do the tapasya to bring Savitri down into the real world. That's one point. And the second is the concept of shining host, that it's the sight, you lose sight of the highest, the deepest, and you get bogged down with nature. And what Savitri is restoring is the sight, and along with which the kingdom is restored. So beautiful. All right, let's dive in.
How do you want to take it, Shrikant? Should we?
You were thinking of going through it chapter by chapter. There are 12 chapters. Any progression you think would be?
I think instead of doing it in a literal chapter by chapter sense, I think let's do it in a thematic sense, because it is so vast. There are 24,000 lines. So for the purposes of today, where we have already kind of 20 minutes into our, I think the important thing, let's do it in two ways. One is let us sort of, as the epic itself unfolds, let us develop the spiritual vision.
I had one more thought. Neelesh. I think the sound of it is fundamental. So at some point, if you could recite parts of it or play parts of it so that people can actually hear the sound at some point.
I will speak about it a bit later.
Sure.
Of
okay.
Course. Maybe once or twice we will cover a bit of that as well. But let's treat today's session as a preliminary understanding for anybody interested to actually go in. Without this understanding, the words by themselves may have a mantric effect, but that is best done in silent contemplation rather than in a group.
Okay.
But we will at the appropriate point. So what we will do is that the Sri Aurobindo spiritual vision is something which, as we said, symbolically, the whole parable is surcharged with that vision, with that consciousness.
Mhm.
What we will do today, in a very humble way, is an overview of the developmental sequence of this spiritual vision and its consummation. Savitri is written in 12 books over 49 cantos, C-A-N-T-O. It's about 24,000 lines of blank verse. Instead of getting into 49 cantos, which will take a long time, we will cover the 12 books in a thematic sense. And that too in very, very condensed fashion. Each sentence of each of these things that we are going to say itself can be unpacked for a few hours. But therefore, I just want to set the stage that is very compact. Not everything we will be able to expatiate today. But because this recording will remain, we can basically go back and double click on each.
Yes. Yes. Let me emphasize that point again, that this meetup is one of the most ambitious meetup I have ever attempted. Okay. The work itself, this is something that Sri Aurobindo carried with him and worked with him through decades. It is gathering together of his entire philosophy, integration of all of the Indian thought as he saw it, picking up whatever he could of other thoughts. It's all dramatized. It is all put in this integrated form. It is something that needs a lifetime of study. And what we are going to do is that all we can do here is to give you some kind of an overview very briefly. And that's also very hard to do for a book like this, but give you some sense of why it is worth diving into it. Okay, so if the result of this meetup is that some of you start reading it, we would have succeeded brilliantly. Okay, go ahead, Neelesh.
Yes. Well said, Srikant. The first book is called The Book of Beginnings. Over 5 cantos, the Book of Beginnings sets the stage for the great yoga for the new world. It dwells on the edge of creation. It depicts the diurnal cycles of the graded progression from darkness to light. And everything that I'm saying, we have to understand in a secret, occult, spiritual sense, not in the literal sense. So graded progression from darkness to light in a physical sense is that the sun is rising and it's gradually becoming, right? In a spiritual sense, it is from darkness to illumination, and the opposite at the end of the day, right? That's how we should basically always keep in mind everything that we are saying now. It goes through, it captures the various meanings of life. Savitri consenting to fight the iron law by building the bridge between spirit and matter. All this is the Book of Beginnings. The secret working of the spirit behind the chancy and dangerous game of nature that we have seen over the centuries, millennia, thousands of years. And finally, it introduces us to the first phase of Ashwapathy's yoga, which is called the psycho-spiritual tapasya for soul release and soul fulfillment. I have said many phrases here. Each is pregnant with a huge amount of meaning, and I'm tempted to go into each, but we will not. So in the sequence, this is an introduction. It sets the stage and introduces the two main people. The next book is called the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds. This is the largest book in this whole work. It covers 15 cantos. It describes Ashwapathy's cosmic yoga as a preparation for the mother. After the sighting of the great stair of spirit's descent and matter's ascent. Those who, if you watch the previous talks, we talked about planes. Okay, so that's what is called the world stair. It's like a staircase. Ashwapathy travels this staircase, starts with the subtle world through alternating cycles of darkness and light. In each grade of the vital, ordinary, mental, higher and illumined ideal, the intuitive, the saguna and the nirguna Brahman, and the cosmic consciousness culminating in the overmental gnosis, approaching the portals of omniscience. Every phrase here corresponds to a canto, and every canto describes in unbelievable level of detail the yogic journey through each of these levels. It's unbelievable. It is important to understand that at each step of this spiritual staircase, there are passages of joy and peace, as well as tremendous danger and gloom in equal measure. Why? Because this is a yoga of ascent and descent. And we will revisit this point more when we are doing a key message summary of the whole work. But it's important to understand this. It's like a sine wave for those who are familiar with math. The next book is called the Book of the Divine Mother. Over 4 cantos, this moves Ashwapathy's yoga from the yoga of the universal cosmic. Remember we mentioned cosmic yoga in the beginning of the previous book. Here, the yoga moves from the universal cosmic through the world to the yoga of the transcendent for the world. Cosmic through the world to the transcendent for the world. The indiscernible vast beyond cosmic mind, the sighting of the transcendent mother beyond the world mother. The transcendent mother as the mediatrix between the earth and the supreme. It deals with the overcoming of the last resistance, the seeding of the new creation, a dialogue, and eventually securing the mother's slow consent to descend through and as Savitri as her own emanation. Ashwapathy, in the story, it is Ashwapathy invoking the sun god, but in the actual world, this is Sri Aurobindo going there to invoke the descent of the Divine Mother, and he's actually done that. As probably Srikant may have mentioned in the earlier talk, this is the autobiography, the yogic spiritual autobiography of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. The next book is the Book of Birth and Quest. Over 4 cantos, it describes the arrival of Savitri as a mortal being in an opportune seasonal turn in a specially crafted adhara. Adhara is basically a body, as the embodied flowering of the divine will, to raise the earthly endeavors spiritwards. But she finds inadequate earth soul response, even among the so-called sages and adepts. So this book lays out the scale and scope of the ambition of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's work, and how much stepping up has to be done by us or whoever wants to do the yoga beyond everything that we normally conceive of as spiritual practice. That is the import of this book. The next book is called the Book of Love. Over 3 cantos, it's a lyrical ballad celebrating the alchemical potential of human love. The potential of human love to actually reach the transformative divine quality. The omniscient will uses an apparently adverse turn of events for a greater cause. We feel also in this book the gentle tumult of soul recognition from time immemorial. Because this is the two original powers of creation meeting each other. You have to think of it that way. And the Salwa woods, which is where, in the actual story, Satyavan and his parents were, that's where they were camping, so to speak. So that is the destined meeting place. And so the book of love actually describes the communion, genuine, true communion between two souls in the aspiration of the highest truth, and a total and unconditional self-giving. So this is a definition of love which we must know, and this is not normally known to us as we understand love. This is the important import. Love is a much maligned, much debased, much corrupted notion. After experiencing the sweetness of love, the book of fate, over 2 cantos, deals with the complex issue of determinism and free will. There's a large bit of philosophical treatment in this book. The alignment of the personal will with the all will or the whole will. The role of pain in matter's unconscious trance. And the taste of the secret joy in the pangs of world redemption. The next book is the book of yoga. So that the first 3 books were the books of the yoga of Ashwapathy. Psycho-spiritual self-fulfillment, cosmic, transcendent. This one book is the entire yoga of Savitri. In a sense, it is of central importance in the whole epic. Over 7 cantos, we are taken through the intractable real life issues faced by the spiritual aspirant. And it's interesting to note how this yoga stands with Ashwapathi's yoga. This is the mother's yoga. We see the love-anguish correlation in the human sphere. The choices between accepting fate and changing it. The need and difficulty of finding one's soul behind the instrumental nature. In the mystic cavern behind the heart center. The perilous passage through the inner countries when we move from the outer nature to the inner nature. The interplay and the limitations of the 3 gunas of nature. Those who are familiar with the gunas, you will surely must be covering that in the Bhagavad Gita. Qualities of nature, tamas, rajas, and sattva. The nihilist propensity and the temptation to lose oneself in the all-negating void. Many spiritual paths have done that and have gone there and haven't come back. The dual powers in the cosmic consciousness. Cosmic knowledge and in equal measure, cosmic ignorance. In this book, we get the glimpses of the yoga of descent in and through Savitri, where with the superconscient force opening the chakras and affecting the divine governance of the entire range of nature's instruments. It's an unparalleled book. Every book is unparalleled. But this is of central importance because it is Savitri's yoga in preparation for what is to come next. And the next book is called the Book of Death. It has only 1 canto. And it's actually called Canto 3 for a certain reason, because it actually goes back to the first book. And what intervened was actually a flashback. Now, on that fateful day when every moment of time is like an eternity of dreadful apprehension, because Satyavan is to die in a year, as we know in the story, we witness the equanimity of the divine feminine, for she betrays not even a trace of her inner state. We also see Satyavan's state of surrender at the critical moment. And very important import here in a spiritual sense is the significance of the soul state at the time of death. This is of direct practical significance to all of us and our near and dear ones. We also feel and get to know that the main instruments of the anti-divine cosmic mind, cosmic ignorance, we said, are fear, despair, and gloom, which uses the physical body as the last bastion of darkness. The Book of Death. The next book is called the Book of Eternal Night. Over 2 cantos, this book exemplifies the tussle between the two powers in the black pit of unconsciousness, or inconscience, as the term Sri Aurobindo uses. What are the two powers? Love and death. Love, which is steadfast in its aspiration and resolve, and death as falsehood, using the power of truth, but twisting it for its dark, nefarious ends. We also understand that the eternal no is a necessary passage for the highest bliss. Hell as a shortcut to heaven's gates. The Book of the Double Twilight is the next one. Double Twilight is the transition zone. It happens twice in 24 hours, at dawn and dusk, yes? One is when the light is ascendant, the other is when darkness is. Symbolically, for the human consciousness, the first represents what we can call the ideal. And the second is what we tend to call the practical real. So the Book of Double Twilight, over 4 cantos, narrates the passageways of the soul after death. It offers death's materialistic, deterministic, and cynical arguments against love and immortality. So we get a full philosophical overview of the negative or the defeatist metaphysics that has plagued humanity for centuries. And we also see Savitri's gently powerful affirmative cogency against all of them. She's the divine feminine. Till we actually witness death's symbolic deformation. Death's deformation of the truth dissolving before her emerging divine power, which conquers the earthly real. So there's a canto. And the earthly real is matter, because for us, in the materialist sense, what is real? Matter. Spirit is some unknown, right? So that's why that's called the ideal and this is the real, and the gap had to be bridged, which is what is done in the Double Twilight. That's why Double Twilight. So yoga bridges the seemingly irreconcilable gap of the ideal and the real, and the inevitability of night intervening between the 2 days. So the next book is therefore called, befittingly, the Book of Everlasting Day. There is no night. The Book of Everlasting Day. So there is no more the sign movement. It is a pure flight to bliss and delight and knowledge. A single canto. So the old creation is the cyclicality of night and day. The new creation is an ever brightening day. The movement from ignorance to knowledge is replaced by the movement of knowledge, from knowledge to greater knowledge. The iron law of destruction and death is transfigured to ongoing creation without the wastefulness, pain, and inefficiency of having to start all over again. The seesaw between love and strife, as we encounter it, transforms into a cadence of greater and greater love ad infinitum. So in this one single canto, Savitri refuses the temptation to escape to everlasting heavenly felicity offered to her by the Supreme. And she makes the statement that until all are free, no one is free. This is the Divine Mother's consciousness. I mean, in language, I have not come across anywhere. We are gifted the description of Savitri citing the fourfold being. First in its triple form, Virat, the physical cosmos, Hiranyagarbha, the subtle dream world, the Supreme inhabiting the entire subtle dream world, and Prajna, or Pragya, which is the causal superconscient. And then finally the Supreme directly. There are 6 pages. Savitri citing the Supreme and conversing with him. This single canto is named The Soul's Choice and the Supreme Consummation. Why the soul's choice? Because Savitri refuses the offer to move into heavenly felicity and says, I have to get back. That is why when in the story, he says, you and Satyavan, you can join Satyavan with me. Yama says, the Lord of God of Death. He says, no, I have to go back and take him to earth. So that leads to the last book, which is called book 12. It's called the epilogue. It's called Return to Earth. So the final message of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga is go everywhere, traverse the whole cosmos, touch the transcendent, but with that power, come back to the earth. So in the language of physics, death is the pull of matter. That's gravity, right? Escape velocity is the ability of a satellite to defy and escape the power of gravity. Only here, you don't escape forever into space. You go back in a spiritual sense, free yourself from the death knot, or the death trap of matter, touch the superconscient, amass the full power of the transcendent, and come back to liberate earth nature from the iron law of gravity by transforming matter. So book 12, in a sense, is the message of the integral yoga. And the return to earth, as it's called, is therefore for the implementation of the supramental time vision.
Wow. All right, Neelesh, this was just masterful. Okay, what I want to do now is, so firstly, there is just so much here. This is so deep.
Let me, since you mentioned it, Shrikant, I'll just recite a few lines here.
Please do.
The consummation and the final message of the integral yoga, these lines are very, very, as you mentioned. So I'm just, thus shall the earth open to divinity, because it's return to earth. And common natures feel the wide uplift. Illumine common acts with the Spirit's ray, and meet the deity in common things. Nature shall live to manifest secret God. The Spirit shall take up the human play. This earthly life become the life divine.
Wow. Wow. All right. Let's see. This is very challenging. What I was thinking of doing is to do a one very gentle pass over some, maybe 1 point each of the 12 chapters. I have noted a few points. I know each of these points is very deep. Maybe we can't go through all of them, but let me just run through the points, the 12 points that I had for the 12 chapters, and you can pick up whatever you think you can be done. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the chapter on beginning, there is the concept of Ashwapathi's yoga. So what is the nature of Ashwapathi's yoga? That is one thing that stood out to me. The second, well, you're talking about the second chapter, not trying to, I'm just looking at the thing that really stood out to me from the things that you said and things that could possibly be talked about. So I'm going to put a bunch of things on the table and you can pick whatever you want to talk about. The second was this beautiful concept of the ascent of matter and descent of spirit. This seems to be a core theme in Aurobindo. In the third book, the book of Divine Mother, there is the issue of overcoming of the last resistance. And the yoga, you made a distinction between the two yogas. I didn't quite get that. In the book 4, I really loved the term Adhar. I'd never really thought about it that way. And finding that Savitri or Sri Aurobindo did not find enough support on earth for what they were about to do. That was their first reaction when they looked around. In the book of love, this again is, seems amazing. The idea of the two spirits meeting. If you could talk more about that, about the interaction between Savitri and Satyavan. In the book of Fate, the idea of alignment of your will with the cosmic will as a way of dealing with this problem of determinism and free will. Looks like the 7th book is where the core of the core of it is, because it is her, Savitri, getting, preparing herself. So anything on that, the yoga of Savitri, I'm tempted to just run and read that book right away. In the book of death, the idea that it's the fear, despair, and gloom that undercuts everything. In the book of eternal night, seeing that it is really between love and death, love versus death. So that being the core battle. Double twilight. Again, the term that I love is bridging the gap between the ideal and the real, and looking at this defeatist metaphysics versus, I liked your term of kind of gently powerful speech, the words of Savitri. In the book of Everlasting Day, This is what does it look like once you have achieved this. And then finally, the core point about return to earth. You have to do this here. So those are the things that stood out in my mind. So please feel free to pick up on any 1, 2, 3, whatever you want, and say anything that you want about any of these themes.
I think what will be useful is for us to understand the deeper meanings of love and death to start with.
Sure.
Because we answer some of the questions you asked, not in a book-wise sense, but in an overall thematic sense. And then we will, the important point about ascent and descent will get covered there. And then what is the central theme of this book really? Why is this called the Veda of the future? Why is this, in my opinion, the greatest composition of humankind ever? See, the central theme of the book is the invoked arrival of the highest Shakti, or the supramental Mahashakti of the Supreme. And its installation in earth nature. This is Savitri's yoga. Her yoga, the book of yoga, prepares for this, and her encounter with death and the dark void consummates it. The Divine Mother is, so Savitri as the Divine Mother is the incarnational embodiment of the Supreme Mahashakti. Now, if we look at the history of human spirituality, prior to this, the Divine Feminine or the Mahashakti's role was always in the background, isn't it? We had the Vedantic concept of Brahman, and everywhere, Christ, Buddha, you look at every avenue of human spiritual endeavor, the Mahashakti, the Divine Feminine, has always been in the background. This is the first time, not just in the composition sense, but in the actual yoga sense, it's actually here. The world that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have left for us is the Divine Mother is actually here in a spiritual sense. Now, it is this power that converts the diurnal cycle of the symbol dawn to the everlasting day. The first line of the book is, it was the hour before the gods awake. So this is the beginning of creation. And then there's the symbol dawn, this dawn symbolizing the human aspiration towards light. But we find that the dawn is followed by a dusk. That's why a diurnal cycle. The last line of the whole composition of Savitri is, and in her bosom nursed a greater dawn. This is so pregnant with symbolism. What is a greater dawn? It is a dawn where there will be no dusk. What does that mean? Symbolically, what does that mean? It is a step change. This is the new creation. It is a complete step change in the evolutionary journey of the human being. Now, from dusk to dawn is 18 hours in the context of the story, kind of, slightly less than 24 hours. But this symbolically is the entire cosmic trajectory between the old and the new creation. So that is why Sri Aurobindo underscores to your question about how is this yoga different. Sri Aurobindo's yoga is to prepare earth nature to deserve. There is a term in Indian philosophy called adhikara. It was used in the Vedic days when the teacher used to say that for a certain kind of knowledge, you have to develop the adhikara before I can even impart the knowledge to you. Extend that in a much wider concept of the whole cosmic movement itself. So Sri Aurobindo's yoga is pure tapasya. The mother's yoga is also tapasya, but Sri Aurobindo's yoga, very loosely speaking, is the yoga of ascent, which means go to the highest scale of supramental existence, bring that power. All of Sri Aurobindo's writing in the Arya beforehand was that. Savitri is the first place where it is the yoga of descent, which means I take that power, but instead of losing myself in the empyrean heights of bliss, I enter the dark, black pit of death and impregnate the lowest point with that highest power. That is integral yoga. Who does that? The Divine Mother. What is the power she uses to do that? Divine love. This is a message which is not even there in the Gita. The sweetest alchemical power alone of the Divine Mother can make this most difficult yoga in terms of the goal, the easiest in terms of the method, with the highest ROI. This is the relationship of the two yogas, Srikant. That is why, for the first time, we have a double avatar. That is the significance. That's why the mother says that without me, he doesn't exist. Without him, I am not manifest. Something of this nature. So in a symbolic sense, it is Savitri and Satyavan. In the real life sense, it is Sri Aurobindo and the mother. That addresses one or two questions of yours in some way, especially about the yoga and the difference between two yogas. The ascent and descent, the point you raised about the second book, this is direct Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, which is the philosophy of involution and evolution. What does it mean? In short, it means that in this graded hierarchy of planes, the highest is concealed in the lowest. Even in the darkest pit of death, there is the full blazing power of spirit. It's just that it is concealed. That is the Leela, that is the play, that is the whole dance of creation. So for the whole riddle of existence to get solved, the highest power of spirit has to be rescued and liberated in the lowest. So death is actually a cover of immortality, you see. This is unbelievable. The whole philosophy of rebirth is that death, from the point of view of nature, death is the greatest impediment to immortality, isn't it? Because it is in the middle. It stands in the middle with its tremendous, ominous, chilling presence. From the point of view of the soul's yoga, it is a shortcut to immortality, provided I can conquer it. Who does this? The two of them together in their spiritual cadence of yogas. Now, we have to understand the esoteric and philosophical deeper meanings of love and death. What is love? I think of it as maybe three ways we can say right now. Love is A, the discovery of the inmost soul level intimacy united in aspiration for the divine. One of your questions. So what we normally understand is love, emotional, sentimental, I like you, you like me, you do this, you do this. That is like really superficial. Soul level intimacy, recognizing each other, to your question. How do they recognize each other? Because they were both there from creation, because they were the creators. I recognize you because in the supreme, soul and nature are strange bedfellows. Because what is soul and nature? It is the consciousness of spirit and the power of consciousness. The witness who holds the space and the power which goes and manifests. The eternal Purusha and the eternal Shakti. So they recognize each other because they are all of creation, all of cosmic play is only the courtship of he and she. He with a capital H, she with a capital S. Hence the recognition. So that is the first definition of love. Soul level intimacy united in the aspiration for the highest for the world. The second is the infinite patience of the soul with nature to gently enjoin her consent. No force, no totalitarianism, no brutalization. The Divine Mother, if she wanted, she could have destroyed death with a flick of her eyelid. Why does she go through such a process? Because even death as a cosmic force needs to go through his own yoga. And eventually he does. The third meaning of love is the total self-giving of the superconscient, reaching down all the way to lift up the inconscient, the highest plane to the lowest plane to help it wake up. So understood this way, the spirit matter cleavage or the rift between the inner and the outer, which we keep talking about, if you think of it that way, it is the single biggest act of spiritual violence committed in the history of humanity. And it is the wound from that spiritual violence that has allowed the reign of hopelessness, fear, and death. The mother comes to heal that primordial wound. The bridge building between the superconscient and the inconscient is the most profound act of love. The divine spark in ourselves is the supreme's act of self-giving because he has placed himself inside us in an individual sense. The descent of the twin avatar is the corresponding gesture for the collective. Am I making sense?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Neelesh. So what I want to do now is I want to give a chance for other people to ask questions. But again, the way in which we are going to do the questions is in the way in which I did my questions. We're going to take all your questions, try to come up with the best question. Don't talk too much. Just put a question on the table because I want to get to as many questions. I'm sure you have many questions. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you have questions. I will collect all the questions, will organize them, and then I will pose them to Neelesh. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to ask questions, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. Okay. If you want to make a short comment about the presentation, you're welcome to do that as well. And then we'll proceed from there. So we're going to start with Madhav, followed by Jyoti. Folks, go ahead and type exclamation mark to line up. So you can make a short comment about what you thought of the presentation if you want. Ideally, just state your question. I'll give you one more chance to talk about your comments at the end, okay? Let's do the comments at the end. There are plenty of questions. Let's just go with questions right now. So it's going to be Madhav, Jyoti, Francois, and Elena. Madhav, go ahead.
So my question is, when you talk about the descent, this reminds me of when Krishna Bhagavan says, Yada Yada Dharmasya, but that's in a masculine form. When you talk about Mahashakti, it's in a feminine form. So what is the special nature of femininity in spirituality that makes this story very profound?
Wonderful. Excellent question. Special nature.
Let me take that right
Sure.
now because we might lose. See, that was an excellent question, Madhav. Now, this new creation can be understood as the full play of Krishna and Kali, since you use the Krishna spiritual metaphor. So Krishna, as understood, is divine bliss, the Anandamaya, right? Kali, for those who are familiar with the Indian spiritual tradition, will understand what Kali is. For the others, Kali is divine dynamism. It's very important. Now, the Vedantic conception of Brahman was as the Anandamaya. The Ananda. So Krishna in the whole Vedantic conception is the Anandamaya Brahman. But the Anandamaya Brahman was incomplete because in the way it was understood in humanity, it tended towards static self-absorption and exit from the cycle. This is an error. It's not that Sri Krishna meant it, but that was the error. So now the Divine Mother brings in two other aspects of the Brahman which were missing from the pure Anandamaya. What are the two? Shaktimaya and Premamaya. So as much as Anandamaya is a quality or the divine guna of the Brahman, so is the Shaktimaya and the Premamaya. Active dynamis and self-giving love. That is what the divine feminine brings in the integral yoga.
Beautiful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Francois, and Elena. Jyoti, what's your question?
Firstly, thank you, Neelesh, very much. What you did was something that I have not experienced before, bringing the abstract into concrete. I really appreciate it. It makes me understand a little better. My question is, in this day and age of modernity, when everything is we are so busy in our life, how can we bring tapasya in our life so that we can have at least some fulfillment of the fulfillment quality that you are talking about in Savitri?
Beautiful question. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Francois, followed by Elena. Folks, go ahead and type the exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom in order to put your questions on the table. Francois.
Yes, I was very interested by the three aspects of love and that you were talking about, but I think I missed the third one. So I got the first one which was discovery of innermost soul intimacy. The second one was more about the patience, infinite patience of the soul. And what I was missing the third one.
Okay. Srikant, maybe if some of these questions, if I answer immediately.
Yeah, we can go ahead and answer them. Go ahead. You can take both Francois' question now and Jyoti's.
Yeah, we might lose the thread otherwise.
Yeah,
so because there are some very good questions.
Sure.
So the Jyoti, your question is requires a long answer, but I will simply, for the sake of brevity, say, just at every point we can be vigilant about the pull of the lower nature. At every point, every moment. So this in Sri Aurobindo, all life is yoga. This yoga doesn't happen on the yoga mat or on a mountaintop. It happens in every living, waking, moving moment of life. So the tapasya we can do is a level of self-vigilance and a commitment of rejecting the pull of the lower nature, all aspects of the lower nature, every dimension of lower nature that you can think of, and letting them go, or restraining them, or transforming them, or holding them, and invoking the higher power so that the essential element in the lower nature, which is not entirely false, is divinized, uplifted, and raised to its higher stature. This is what tapasya means. And when he says Lord of the Horse, Ashwapathy, the connotation is that this has to be a single-minded endeavor of concentrated energy. In other words, this cannot be done, this sublimation of the lower nature and its divinization to the higher nature in every aspect and sense, because we are very complex and composite parts. There are different parts in ourselves, and each is a unique nature, and we are also dancing with others in our life. But life will give us, if we are vigilant and if we have that eye, it will give us clues on where we can actually make this yagna ourselves. This sacrifice is not the literal lighting of the fire. This sacrifice in a spiritual sense is sacrificing our lower to the higher, as we mentioned in our previous, if you remember. But the only way to do it is that the aspiration has to be single pointed. That is why the Lord of the Horse, that is why Ashwapathy. And believe me, if we set our mind to it, life will give us ample opportunities every day. That's why he says that in this yoga, life is a 24-hour gymnasium, except that we're not dealing with dumbbells and treadmills, but with world forces. That's why the lower part of what he says in the author's note. That is the means of tapasya. It can start right there where you are right now. And likewise with me and with everybody here. This is the beauty of it. But to prepare for it, it will require a little bit of reading and understanding the philosophy, and a little bit of, you have to basically understand what he's saying, because there is a philosophy here. There is a cosmology. But be that as it may, opening to the Divine Mother and her Mahashakti will take us through the yoga itself. So thank you for the question.
Wonderful. You want to take Francois's question?
Francois, the three meanings of love. The first is soul communion and soul alignment between two or more, in this case two, united completely with the aspiration for the highest. And in this case, the highest is the life divine, which means bringing the power of the superconscient transcendent in the lowest level of matter, in conscience, which is matter, physical matter. So that's the first point. The second is soul's patience with nature. What does this mean? The soul, being pure consciousness, tends to leap towards the ideal very quickly. As we know, as we say, the mind is willing, but the body is, you know what I'm saying? Or the spirit is willing, but this thing is pulling me or dragging me down. I want to go for a jog in the morning. I'm using very, very simple examples now. But my body says, sleep for another 3 hours. This is a very simple way of saying the essential difference between the heavens of the ideal and the domain of the earthly real. It's like normally everybody we tell each other, right? Oh, that's pretty idealistic, but come down to real life, that ain't going to happen. That is the suggestion of death. That argument, the structure of that argument is the argument from the domain of death, because it puts a schism and creates a wall between what can be and what is, between the outer and the inner, between spirit and matter, etc., etc. So soul's patience over nature means the soul power has to first free itself from the clutches of nature, because it is enmeshed in nature right now, achieve its sovereignty, and then go back and coax nature to transform. So in simple terms, what does it mean? To give a practical example, the mind has to tell the body, no, get up, we have to go for a jog. And then the body consents. So that's the second meaning of love. The third, so this was in a horizontal sense. We talked about the inner planes and the inmost planes. The third meaning is the love of the higher for the lower, the highest for the lowest, which means those of us who are fortunate, more fortunate than others. I don't mean in the normal sense of charity and giving money and NGOs, not in that sense. Those who are blessed with a higher consciousness and have the aspiration for the yoga helps others to travel that same difficult path. So that's in a practical sense, I'm saying. In a spiritual sense, it is the love of the divine for us. And he calls it a mutual debt. The divine has placed himself inside us as the psychic being, and he's requesting us, you come to me and be like me. and hence the yoga. These are the three esoteric meanings of love.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next question is from Elena. Folks, if you have questions, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Elena, what's your question?
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the greatest work, obviously. I'm just getting now more familiar with it. And my question is, could you please speak about alignment of personal with will, with divine will, and the mystical behind the heart center? So you mentioned that, Neelesh. So what just expand on that, please? That would be wonderful.
Sure.
There's lots of questions, but it's one that came to me.
Actually, I'll take the first question first because Shrikant asked that same question, which I probably missed. So basically, this is the ego, the problem, the fundamental problem of ignorance premised on the ego. To make it simple, let me give an example. Say you, as the overall human being, wants to go in a particular direction. Say walk north, say for example. But your toenail or middle finger, or maybe say the knee, says, no, I want to go south. There's a problem. The knee has the misconception that it is a separate entity, unconnected or unrelated to you as the overall being. And therefore, in that ignorance, it tries to exercise its own whim or will or impulse. I want to go southeast. What happens? The body doesn't move and there's a massive chaos, and there is, I'm giving a very simple example. So the crux of ego-based existence is that each of us in the grip of the ego are unconnected or disconnected with the whole. Whole in two senses. Whole is the entirety of manifest creation or the cosmos, and whole in terms of the transcendent, who is the governor of this entire cosmos. Remember, we talked about the individual, the universal, and the transcendent, the three important principles in the first talk. When the individual forgets or is oblivious of the cosmic movement, the totality of the cosmic movement and the transcendental will, he tries to do his own thing. And that's what is called the problem of desire. And it causes tremendous disharmony and pain. This is the crux of egoistic existence. Your question actually reveals the crux of it. When I align myself with the whole, in other words, if the knee or the finger said, oh, okay, Elena wants to go north, I align, firstly I align, I understand what it is, and I consent to go north. So then it's a harmonious movement. If all the body parts, your or mine or whoever, understands what is the intent and the direction of the whole, the movement of the infinite and the eternal, which is the transcendent, and we are aligned with that, we have solved the problem of harmony. Until we haven't aligned with the all will, we are in perpetual strife and suffering.
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Jyoti. And folks,
sorry, just one thing. The mystic cavern is the location behind the heart center where the soul resides. The soul is not a physical thing. It is the divine spark. It is an occult spiritual reality. But actually, if you have to find it in a physical sense, it is in a place called the Hridaya Guhayam. In Sanskrit, it means the cavern, the secret cave behind the heart. And that is where one can find the soul. When we talk of psychic transformation, we will actually find it there and sense it there. And that's the place of the Divine Mother in us. Thank you for that question as well.
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Jyoti, followed by Ambika. Jyoti.
Yeah, I have a quick question. What is the difference between devotion and love?
It depends on who is speaking. From the divine standpoint, there is no difference, Jyoti. Bhakti or devotion and divine love are exactly the same thing. The crux of both those words is complete, total, unconditional self-giving. And in a sense, the alignment of my intention with your intention. So love basically means complete identity in consciousness, and therefore complete alignment in vision, in cosmic trajectory, in movement, in everything, and therefore no harmony, loss of harmony. Devotion as a term is used. Love is more used between equals, and devotion is more used when in the beginning, when we are starting, when we don't have the capacity to view the Supreme as the lover or the beloved. There is a general devotional component which is looking up, and that's why it should begin, because that instills the humility. But the ultimate station of love is not somebody whom we look up to and fear, but the Supreme as the complete, utter, total beloved and lover.
Thank you. Next up is Ambika. Ambika, what's your question?
So before the question, I have to say something. And so firstly, Neelesh, this was a really beautiful sweep of the whole epic, whereas the soul is the protagonist through Mahashakti. I'm seeing action and principle, actions based on principles, preparing the vessel with virtues, navigating day and night, time, the cultivation of love, which is already inherent, but to awaken, to revive it, the involution and evolutionary process, that's the whole synthesis of yoga. It's ongoing cyclic forces dealing with the dark and the light, whose ultimate goal is the divinization and that which is freedom. And this is supreme love. And that tells me that we all have a lot of works to do and unfold. I'm taking the word from the Gita. So in today's context, where do we begin with the idea of freedom that you mentioned? He said, if everybody isn't free, we are not free. How does this love free us?
It may sound a bit sort of too brief as an answer, but I would say just if we start reading Savitri, that's enough. Because, the mother, Shrikant has put this in the text in the meetup, in the event description. Savitri, the reason I call it the greatest piece of work, and by far without any second anywhere close by, is because just by itself can take us all the way. It can solve all our problems, answer all our questions, unbundle the riddle of existence, deliver the supramental vision, and take us through an adventure of consciousness that is unparalleled, that we cannot even imagine otherwise. So take this up. You already have the book. Dive in, open to the mother, and the rest is done. And this is the point of, this is why I say the mother's yoga is different from Sri Aurobindo. The question the Shrikant asked. The yoga of tapasya was done by somebody to bring the mother. Once the mother is here, you have to understand this in the spiritual sense, in an occult sense. Once the mother is here, just opening to the mother is enough. It is shockingly simple. All this, so much of philosophy, just open to the mother and read Savitri a few pages a day. Seriously, believe me, the job will get done. It will take some time, but it will get done.
Thank you. Folks, what I want to do next is to have people talk about what they got from this meetup. This was one of the most ambitious meetups we've done. And this is this is such a profound work that this is by its nature only an introduction. Okay, and an advertisement to want to go and read it yourself, because you have to commune with it in order to get the most of it. But I would love to hear what you got from the presentation today, and then we'll go to the next step. So go ahead and type ! If you would like to share what you got from the meetup today. We'll start with Madhav. Madhav, go ahead.
So for me, it bridged two different ideas, this talk. The first idea is about Nirguna Brahman, and that's the Vedic idea, where you said Sri Krishna is bliss, but we forgot the aspect of Saguna Brahman, which has a form, which has love and all these other qualities, which is the feminine nature. And so now I understand a little bit more the play between the Saguna Brahman and the Nirguna Brahman, and why we need both of these to excel spiritually.
Wonderful. Next up is Francois.
Yes, first, thank you very much, Neelesh, because what it brought to me as a complete beginner in the Eastern philosophy and Indian philosophy is real clarity, like you're splitting like the very large concepts and how they interrelate with each other, and it was very clear for me. And it's very, very interesting to go deeper in the subject for me, because the way you present it is so clear. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Francois. Next up is Brian Allenby. And folks, if you would like to talk about what you got from the presentation today, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Brian.
Okay, simply, thank you, Neelesh and Shrikant. It's been, let me say, when I read the text that you put in on the web, and I felt that was a bit of an introduction. But having gone through today, I think it's very deep, very hard to understand. I understood it as it was going, but when I think back over it now, I refer back to my notes, and still I'm going to have to listen to this recording 2 or 3 more times to understand. But it's been excellent, really has. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Brian Nelson.
Yes, I'm also new, just as others, to this, and so I hesitate to say anything. I think I have just so much to learn. But I just wanted to express my gratitude to you for doing this, and all of you who put this together and who participated and who have shared because it really it's already touched me, and it has moved me to want to do more. So I'm not quite sure where to go with the want to do more. You've said to read, and I'll do that. But I'd be definitely interested in more discussion along these lines. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. So, Neelesh, I thought that this was incredible. This is just I was already very enthused about diving into Sri Aurobindo's work, and this, I think, is the right place to begin. With Savitri, and I would like to figure out a way of doing that, because I think for an endeavor so profound, so deep, so powerful, it is stunning to see the simple way in which it is done. You read those lines. Those are like jewels, those capture very simply something which is very deep. So I look forward to working with you to figure out how to get people like, for example, Brian Nelson. I know that when he studies something, he will read it. I know he's interested in Bible, so he has read Bible in like 7 different languages, maybe 50 different translations, something like that. So there are people here who will. Also Brian Allenby, though he's not familiar with it, he is also, he will also get into it at the same depth. And this is something, one of the things is that there is a lot of Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy is very large, it is equivalent to Western philosophy as a whole. So it is not, there is temptation from the West to say, oh, this is Indian philosophy, and talk about it in a narrow way. But there is a whole range, and there is a whole range of different viewpoints and ways in which it has been kind of misinterpreted and all of that. The thing I love about Sri Aurobindo is that he's going back to the core of what Indian philosophy has to offer. And this integration between inner and outer, between the ideal and the real, between the spirit and matter, I have not seen it being done at this level anywhere. So I think that is something that is truly at a world level, not at an Indian level, at a world level. It's something that is extremely useful and extremely important. So let us work to figure out what we can do. But let me see. I think Jyoti has something. Jyoti, go ahead.
Yeah. What I got, and which I already told you, Neelesh, that you did a very exemplary job in making the whole thing very comprehensible and understandable. Because to be very honest, I sometimes get a little put off with the Indian philosophies because they are so abstract that I get lost. And you made it seem like, what is there to be lost? There are sequences. You have to understand where it's coming from and where it is going. This is a Veda of the future, as simple as that. And connections, the love, the death, book of love. It's like, I was like tuned all the time and never got tuned out. So I do appreciate that. And I was hoping that you could do at least twice a month, getting greedy here. So thank you very much. And this was really something that opened up my eyes in a different way. I have always shied away from tapasya and what have you, and you made it seem like you can do it anytime, anywhere. You know, you just have to focus. You just have to concentrate. Mother Divine. That's it. Just take one and just do it. So I really appreciate that personally. Thank you so very much. Okay.
Ambika, what did you get from this presentation? Go ahead.
What I got was the beauty of poetry that is also itself a creative process, which here is connecting with divine manifestation to make it real in our lives. And what shows up for me is, are there embodiment practices in this yoga of synthesis, so that people can feel it here, if you know what I mean. I know that place behind the heart is just so beautiful, but you know, certain practices like nyasas.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambika. All right, so Neelesh, thank you so much. Do you have any comments on the comments?
Since you mentioned it earlier and Ambika also mentioned it, probably I could read out something more in
Please do.
Because that power is completely greater than any discussion that we can have. There is as I mentioned, that the Divine Mother's method of yoga is the method is love. And there is no coercion, it is pure, complete self-giving and love. And when faced with death, and death was on her, taking her prized thing away, even she prevailed through the power of love, through the power of discussion. She did not force herself. She was the Divine Mother. She could destroy him, as I said, in 1 minute. And then there comes a time in the double twilight where he says that, you know, you have told me, you have proven to me that my ways are erroneous, and the philosophy of death is ultimately a falsehood. It may be an intermediate truth, but it is not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is immortality. But I don't bow down to knowledge. I bow down to power. That's my way. This is death speaking. can you show me that power? And if you can show me that power, I will pray to that power also. And at this point, I quote Sri Aurobindo. And it's a slightly long passage, so please bear with me. And if you can close your eyes and tune into the vibration, it'll be nice. The power that from her being's summit reigned, the presence chambered in lotus secrecy, came down and held the center in her brow, where the mind's lord in his control room sits. There, throned on concentration's native seat, he opens that third mysterious eye in man, the unseen's eye that looks at the unseen, when light with a golden ecstasy fills his brain, and the eternal's wisdom drives his choice, and eternal will seizes the mortal's will. It stirred in the lotus of her throat of song, and in her speech throbbed the immortal word. Her life sounded with the steps of the world's soul, moving in harmony with the cosmic thought. As glides God's Son into the mystic cave, where hides his light from the pursuing gods, it glided into the lotus of her heart and woke in it the force that alters fate. It poured into her navel's lotus depth, lodged in the little life nature's narrow home. On the body's longings grew heaven rapture's flower, and made desire a pure celestial flame. Broke into the cave where coiled world energy sleeps, and smote the thousand-hooded serpent force that blazing towered and clasped the world self above, joined matter's dumbness to the spirit's hush, and filled earth's acts with the spirit's silent power.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Neelesh. All right, folks, this was just amazing. Amazing. And Neelesh, I'll be in touch with you. We'll figure out, we have to do something more. I think the world needs this pretty badly.
Thank you, Shrikant. On concluding, I'll just, the mother has herself said, the mother in real life is Savitri. And she has said one simple sentence, we can conclude our message. She says that, my children, Savitri is the message. All else is preparation.
Thank you. Thank you, Neelesh. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.